Keeper of the Lost Cities, Neverseen, Chapter 38. Please consider giving me a follow if you haven't already, as we follow along with this chapter. The words bounced around Sophie's head, making her ears ring. Lur and Mitya and Sior had the plague. They could be dying. No, not could be. They were dying. If somebody didn't find a cure. How long can someone have the plague before... She couldn't finish the question. We still do not know, but that's good news in a way, Kala said. All the Wildwood colonists are still alive and fighting. The answer helped a little, but it didn't change the fact that the infected gnomes were still running out of time. Maybe they had months, maybe weeks, maybe days. Whatever it was, they deserved more. But you're safe? She asked Kala. You haven't been exposed? I was very careful, Kala promised, drying her eyes with her long braids. I would not have come back if I wasn't certain. I would never risk Amisi's safety. So what happens now? Keith asked. Kala let out a slow, heavy breath. I don't know. There was no plan for this. Her eyes welled up again. Does the collective know yet? Sophie asked. I couldn't find them. They're taking care of Prentice, Sophie said. Does that mean he's been healed? Kala asked. I tried. It's okay, Kala interrupted. I have no doubt you'll do everything you can. Do you know if they're at the stone house? Is that the cottage in the middle of the moors? Sophie asked. Kala nodded and turned to leave. I need to speak with them before I tell Amisi. They might know something that could bring her better comfort. She and Sierra are courting. I'm going with you, Sophie said, following Kala down the hall. Keith rushed after them. Me too! I don't know where you're going, Dex said as they entered the boys' main room, where he sat on the floor, surrounded by Twiggler's supplies. But you're not going without me. I suppose that means you're coming too, Kala said, glancing up towards an empty corridor. Oh, I really thought I'd figured out how to hide that time, Fiona said as she appeared. But, yep, I'm in. Where are we going? Sophie did her best to catch them up. Dex looked like someone had crushed all his gadgets to dust. We have to help them, he whispered. They saved us, Sophie. Or Mitya. I know, said Sophie. Bianna rushed to give Kala a hug. Are you sure it's safe for you to leave Louveterre? The plague seems to be popping up everywhere. We'll travel deeper than normal, and I'll steer clear of the neutral territories, Kala promised, heading outside and down the winding stairs. When they reached ground level, she sang a deep, earthy song to create a tunnel and tangled the roots around them. The journey was faster than ever, so fast Sophie was sure she lost her stomach several times. But it was worth the nausea when they arrived at the stone house after only a few minutes of journeying. Sophie had assumed it would still be sunny, but when they climbed out of the tunnel, the sky was bruised by twilight, the only light coming from the early stars and the hideout's windows. Should we knock? Bianna asked, as they crept towards the cottage door. No need, Blur said, phasing through the wall and making them all scream. But you do need to explain what on earth you're doing here. How... His voice trailed off when he noticed Kala. Better come in. They squeezed into the room, trying to find places to stand in the small, crowded space. Sophie's heart twisted when she saw Prentice hadn't changed at all since the last time she'd been to see him. He also had guests. Della stood with three figures that Sophie recognized right away, even if her brain kept telling her they couldn't possibly be there. Magnate Leto? Keith asked, sounding equally confused to see Foxfire's principal in a Black Swan hideout. Next to him stood Tiergan, Fitz and Sophie's telepathy mentor, and on his other side was his adopted son, Wiley, Prentice's son. Sophie had only talked to Wiley twice, and both times had been a disaster. She'd never forget their fight at his mother's grave, when he told her, "You were supposed to make it right." And that was when she'd realized she'd been designed for healing minds, and that something must be wrong with her if she couldn't. She'd gone to the Black Swan and risked her life to reset her abilities, and yet, their apprentice rested, farther from being healed than ever. Wiley resembled his father even more than Sophie had realized. His skin was a slightly lighter shade of black, and his features were a bit sharper. But He had his father's hair and lips and eyes. "I'm guessing you weren't expecting to find us here," Magnate Leto said. "It's weird," Biana admitted. "Are you part of the Black Swan?" "That would be rather impossible." Magnate Leto smoothed his black hair, even though it was coated with so much gel it couldn't possibly move. "I'm here to cover for these two." Sophie shouldn't have been surprised that Magnate Leto would help. He protected her when she'd discovered the ability-restricting circlet didn't completely stop her telepathy. "The council is watching us," Tiergan said, tugging on the sleeves of his simple gray tunic. His usually deep... Oh, thank you, ma'am. Doggy bloopers. His usually deep olive skin looked almost as pale as his blonde hair as he added, "The collective hopes that if Prentice hears our voices, it might reach him. So, they pretend to be meeting with me in my office every evening," Magnate Leto added, "and instead we come here. Our pendants have to stay near each other or the council won't believe we've been together," Tiergan explained. "I might be able to fix that," Dex offered. "Maybe another time," Blair said. "Right now, you need to tell us why you're here." "Should we wait for the rest of the collective?" Sophie asked. "They can't get away from their other identities right now," Blair said. Calla asked everyone to head downstairs, not wanting to reveal the bad news in front of Prentice. The round bedroom below was simple but cozy. A bit too cozy once they'd all squeezed in. Sophie was surprised Blur let Tiergan, Magnate Leto, and Wiley join them. She'd spent most of Calla's updates staring at her feet so she wouldn't risk meeting Wiley's eyes. Every time he looked at her, she could see such heartbreaking sadness and disappointment. She was trying to think of something to say to him when she realized the room had gone quiet. "Calla was wondering if you could transmit to Lower Mitchie and Seor," Keith whispered to catch her up. "I can try," Sophie said, hoping her voice sounded less shaky than she felt. "What do you want me to say?" Calla cleared the thickness from her voice. "Tell them we're not giving up, so they must not give up on themselves. And remind them that the good in nature is always stronger than the bad. Ask if there's anything they can share that might help us find a cure, and tell them we love them." Sophie translated the message to Gnomish and transmitted it in every direction. Her brain hurt from the strain, but she kept repeating the call, stretching out her consciousness and listening for any traces of response. For several endless minutes, all she found was a headache. Then, a voice that sounded like Mitch's filled her mind. "They say the plague works in stages. That they're only in stage 1, Sophie whispered. "How many stages are there?" Magnate Leto asked. Sophie transmitted the question, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "They don't know," Sophie said. "So far, the healers have counted 6. But they don't know the final count until someone dies." The word struck a blow, and Sophie was glad Biana could take Calla's hand, especially since she had an even more upsetting message to deliver. "They say there are 237 gnomes in quarantine." The number was too big to fit in such a small room. 237 gnomes, all sick and slowly dying. "We're going to find a cure," Sophie transmitted. "We'll do whatever it takes." Calla was crying by then, and Sophie nudged through the crowd, hugging her tight and repeating the promise she'd given Laura Mitchie and Seor. Calla swallowed hard and reached for the chain of Sophie's allergy remedy, which still held the moonlark pin. "If anyone can do it, it's you," Calla whispered, then pulled away. "I need some air." She disappeared upstairs, and the others went to follow. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Wiley mumbled as Sophie passed him. Sure," Sophie said, even though her stomach felt like a nest of fire ants had taken over. She wasn't sure she could handle another fight. "Let's give them some space," Tiergan said, herding Dex, Keith, and Biana away. Once they were alone, Sophie studied the patchwork quilt on the crystal lamp. Anything to spare her from having to look at Wiley. He cleared his throat. "You know I blame you for what happened to my dad. And I can't promise I'm ever going to stop. But I think I finally get why he sacrificed himself for you." what you just did there, sending that message around the world, and the way that everyone was looking at you, they all believed in you. Thank you, Sophie said, not sure if it was the right reaction. He nodded, and she thought maybe the awkwardness was over, but he stepped closer, his voice deep and intense. Just make it worth it, okay? Everything you did, make it worth it. Sophie wanted to tell him she would, but she didn't want to lie. I promise I'll try as hard as I can. Wiley nodded. He turned to leave, but before he disappeared up the stairs, she told him, "Don't give up on your dad yet, Wiley." He reached up, wiping tears from his cheeks. "I won't if you won't." She held his gaze. "I won't."